58. Someone want to go get the team? Hello, everybody online. How are you? What a great day. I want to welcome you to Empowering Pastors Training. We do this every Tuesday. If you're new with us, we want to invite you to please go to the chat section. We have a team member now opening the chat while he's sitting here eating his food. So we're going to be opening the chat. We'd encourage you to go to that and participate, because it's going to be very important. Now, if you're brand new today, we want to remind you that if you send us your email, you'll get notes as well, so you can use these notes with your team. One of our great desires is not just so that you get trained, but the purpose of you being trained is to train other people. So we give you the notes, which means, I think this morning I spent probably an hour and a half typing up the notes so that you have them. And we can send them to you if you send your email. So everybody that's online, if you'll please go to the chat section and just, it's Pastor Cody that's on, what do they call it? Monitor, what is it? Being the moderator. I have a hard time saying it.
No, you're not.
And if you will, just let them know your email address. We want to make sure that we can get that on the list and send you information. So if you are already on the list, you should have already received your notes. And we want to make sure that you get right in there and get ready to participate. We're going to start in 1 minute. It's 11:59. My team's coming in now, and we want to make sure that we get started. We're starting a new book today. It's called The Orange Revolution, and tremendous book. I think it's going to be really helpful to all of us in development and success. And that's really what we're all after. We all want success. How many of you want success in the room? Yep. Amen. Everybody wants success. Why do we want success? Because the only other option is failure. We don't want failure. Everybody wants to succeed. Hello, Brother Jay. How are you?
Hello, sir. How are you?
Very good. I know there are notes. Pastor Amina Ebo is supposed to have them. They've already been sent out, so they'll be coming in as well.
Oh, it's a fierce beard. What's up? Nice beard.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
How do I get the email? How do you get the email? If you'll go, are you online? If you'll go to the moderator and just give him your email address, we'll make sure that we put that on the list.
Moderator
on YouTube, correct. YouTube Live, there's a place where you can chat. If you'll go to chat, that would be tremendous.
I thin it out.
Well, I was hoping to get thicker and fill in a little better.
We're about ready to begin.
Still don't have it.
Jay, that's a really nice beard, man.
Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it?
It does look
I was
good.
thinking maybe it'd fill in a little better, but
No, it looks good.
I can't get it.
It looks good.
Just can't get it.
Some mascara.
Something? Right there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, don't they make those eyebrow brushes and stuff like that? Like pencil in or something?
That would work.
Oh, women do.
Yeah, that.
If women can draw on eyebrows, Sure.
Hey, young man.
John, the rest of your beard they're missing?
Okay, we're going to begin. I'm going to start beginning on time. Okay, we're beginning a new book today. It's called The Orange Revolution. And it's talking all about teams. We all know that teams are the key to going beyond just you. The interesting part is that many people are just stymied at their capabilities. And the greatest wisdom and the greatest leaders have always been wise enough to surround themselves with teams. In fact, here's a phenomenal quote. Here's what geniuses do. They build great teams. It sounds simple, but it is actually the cornerstone for success. That is, if you cannot build great teams, then you cannot get a large amount of work accomplished. Now, if the vision that you have is small, then it's no big deal. But if the vision that you have is large, then it is a big deal. You have to be able to build teams to bring success. Now, teams are like a marriage. How many of you have been married before or are married? All you who have not been married, hallelujah, you're having the dreams of such, I'm sure. What is marriage? And I always say this when we start talking about marriage. Marriage is two imperfect people coming together to become one.
That was perfect.
It is, isn't it? Marriage is two imperfect people coming together to become one. The Bible says they become one flesh. Now, that's powerful, because what it is ultimately they now become one, moving into their goals that they have as a couple. Now, what is a team? It's a little bit more interesting in the dynamic, because this is the dynamic of a team. It's multiple unique people coming together to accomplish one goal. So instead of just two people, how many, if you've been married, how many of you have ever argued with your spouse before?
Only one.
How many of you disagreed with your spouse before? Amen. So we're looking at, mostly, yeah, that's good. We're looking at, with a married couple, it's a challenge, but with really creating a full team of a large group of people, you have all the uniqueness all balled together. And so it is a little bit more challenging, but at the same time, this is what's going to bring the greater success to what you have as a vision. You can have the greatest vision, but if you cannot accomplish it, then it's failure. So intent is nice. Everybody has the right intent. Everybody wants intentionally to succeed. But you cannot succeed without purpose, without being it and doing it on purpose. So on October 22nd, the most remarkable dream of Edison was birthed. And I want to read this quote. It was drawn by Batchelor, mathematically proven by Upton, built by Crucy and Boehm, and tested by Lawson, Force, and Joule. When someone mentions the creation of the light bulb, the very first person they say is Ed, but it's really not. You know, you haven't been deceived. It just hasn't been divulged. So we're doing that now. The fact is that he couldn't do it himself. Now we all know, and what's usually focused on, and I've focused on multiple times, is how many times did Edison try to create the incandescent light bulb? We know that around the 7,000 mark, somebody actually came up to him and said, you know, you failed. You haven't figured this out in 7,000 times. And he said, no, I haven't failed. I've just learned 7,000 ways not to create the incandescent light bulb. Well, that's how I always focus. But when you really look at the success of creating the light bulb success was built not upon one man, but upon a multiplicity of individuals, upon what's called a team. So Edison, like many geniuses and a notable dreamer, only accomplished what he did by building a team. Now, if you and I aren't willing to create teams, and many people aren't willing to create teams, either one, they don't know how to create a team, or number two, they can't get along well enough to create a team, or they are such a separatist, as we went through last week, that when it's time to create a team, they're unable to follow through because they've got to be able to control everything themselves. I want you to recognize right off the bat that if you're a control freak, how are you successful? Really, you can't be. You can have a level of success, but you truly cannot be successful if you are a control freak. What this means is not just levels of delegation, but levels of trust. Levels of trust is far more challenging, excuse me, far more challenging than just delegation. I can delegate someone to change my shoes for me. I can delegate someone to buff my shoes for me. That's nice. I don't need to trust them to be able to do that. But if you're going to give somebody an element of the organization that you know is imperative to be able to create the ultimate success of the vision that's in your heart, then putting that into their hands means there has to be that level of trust that truthfully many leaders who have extreme control factors can't do. They just can't do it. They are so overlording, they are so dictatorial that they cannot let go and they cannot give control to other people. Edison explained it this way. I generally instructed them on a general idea of what I wanted carried out. And when I came across an assistant who was in any way ingenious, I sometimes refused to even help them with their experiments, telling them if they could not figure it out themselves so far, and he did that just to encourage them. So there needs to be an element of trusting people. Now, one thing I've found as when we build teams is this, is that no one's going to do it the way you do. It's probably one of the most difficult things to step into right off the bat is recognizing that you are never going to find, and that is hard because you want it done. Maybe you've been doing it and you've been successful doing it. but for you to step into your role that's going to allow you to go to the next level. And then also them, we all know the 3 statements that we've made multiple times that we learned from Dr. Johnson. The less I do, the more I accomplish. The less I do, the more I empower others to fulfill their destiny. And the less I speak, the more influence I have when I speak. So the second one is, the less I do, the more I empower others to fulfill their destiny. See, every one of us have such an enormous call upon our lives. Every one of us are an intricate part of the puzzle that God has placed on this planet to fulfill the destiny that he had pre-planned before you were ever formed. There's a necessity to recognize how important you are and the plan that God has for your life. And then it's important for the leader to recognize your calling, your purpose, and then to facilitate the coupling of you with that vision. With that comes levels of trust. With that comes levels of willingness to allow you and I, who are stepping into those postures, to not do it the same way. Well, that's hard. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, that's hard. I've had times where I wanted to grab the reins back. I've had times where I wanted to look at somebody and say, listen, I can do that 10 times better than you can. Yes, sir.
You have.
I have said that?
Yes, you have.
I have said that. Well, that means I actually did it. How long ago was that?
Sure. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to say.
Was it a long time ago?
No.
It wasn't?
I mean, it probably a couple years ago.
Couple years.
There
Phew.
you go.
Who's lying?
I've grown a little bit. It's true, though. It's very difficult, especially when you know that you have the capability of doing something and doing it possibly even more refined.
Right.
But you've got to be able, it's hard. You've got to be able to trust, and you've got to be able to build teams. And if you can't, then you can only go to certain levels. Now, when this church was running probably 250 people, I ran into that, I had that collision. And the collision was, I personally recognized there were so many things, I couldn't reach out to everybody. I couldn't touch everybody myself. There was a necessity of bringing on teams, a necessity of, especially administratively, which was my greater weakness, finding people with administrative skills who could accomplish a task where I myself would be able to trust them to do that. Financially, you know, with more for me, I'm more of a people person. You know, that's where my greater gifts are. And other people are with finances, or other people are with, you know, administration. But me, it's people. And I want to be able to reach the people. I want to be able to love the people. I love hospital calls. I love going to people's homes and loving on them and ministering to them. I love taking them to eat and speaking life into them and going through. I love counseling. I did hours and hours and hours and hours of counseling. I mean, hours. And there came a place where it's impossible for the church to grow. It's impossible for the organization to grow if you're going to do it yourself. And Edison, in his ingenious, recognized that so far back. He said, there's no way for me to mathematically figure it all out. There's no way for me to do all the experiments. There's no way for, he didn't even do the drawings. You know, this is where we've got to get into the flow of recognizing that we are not the all in all. Pastoring is different because I have found that many pastors believe they are the all in all. That without them, without them, nothing's going to be accomplished. And that's just not true. It is, if a leader has a low self-esteem, that's where the real trouble comes. Because that's where they're going to grasp harder and lay hold on quicker when they start losing control. So Edison shared the successes with his team as well as the rewards. Professor Vera John Steiner explains it this way. Collaboration enables people to compensate for each other's blind spots. Collaboration operates through a process in which successful intellectual achievements of one person arouse the intellectual passions and enthusiasms of another. It's gone so far that many teams in today's companies are not true teams. And this is where, even at his tabernacle, I got to constantly look at what we're doing. Now, how many on your team? You have probably, how many people do you guys hire? 150 people. You know, he has 150 people on his team. 15? 115. 115 people on his team. Shem, you're part of how many people on that team?
Which team?
On the whole team that you guys work with at that company?
Henry's?
Yeah.
10.
10. So every organization is different size. I think Josh has what, 2 or 3? He's just started. He has 3. He's just started. He's got 3 already on his team. Every one of us need to recognize and be willing to evaluate our teams. This statement is so strong, and this book is kind of aggressive when it comes to team building, because it says that many people who have called themselves teams are no more than foe. Everybody knows what the word foe means, right? It means fake. It has a look of team, but has no team at all. It's like they have a form of godliness, and they deny the power thereof. Organizationally, structurally, motivationally, they are set up to work together effectively. They are simply vague. They're simply vague labels placed on random groupings or even the entire organization as a whole. And those labels accomplish nothing. So they're called a team, but they're not a team. They might have the organizational structure of a team. They might look like they're to be a team. But ultimately, in the infrastructure, how it's actually run, how it's actually working, they're not teams. It goes back to last week's teaching. They're still separatists. Even if it's set up properly, it doesn't mean it's going to be a team. And this is where, again, it gets back to where you have a lot of infighting, you have a lot of disagreements, you have a lot of separatism, even within the group. You could have 10 groups that are supposed to be working together as one flow, as one wheel. And now you don't have one wheel anymore. You have 8 little sections of the wheel that are now no longer willing to participate with the rolling of the wagon. So it doesn't matter how it looks, it matters how it functions. It doesn't matter how it works, it matters how it works. And this has to be really looked upon. They continue to be groups or departments of people that simply have a blanket of team thrown on them. Take a peek underneath, and you'll find a group of individuals largely fending for themselves. And this is something that is uncomfortable, because that means you got to look under the sheets. That means you got to look at stuff that's uncomfortable, make people upset. Church, now I don't know how it is, and this is where I like to talk to the business people. And you hear me ask Jay or Shem or some of the other business people that are in the room, because I've been in church almost 30 years. So sometimes it runs a little bit different, and we want to make sure that both worlds are touched here, because principles are principles. In the church world, when you have a staff member or a situation within your team that's not working, and you look under the sheets and you find that under the sheets something's not going to work, and it's time to let somebody go. I had a friend of mine not too many years ago, had an individual on his team for almost 30 years as a pastor, and he had to let that person go. And he said it was the most difficult thing he's ever done in his entire life. Now you need to recognize that the ripple effect that does, because being part of a staff of a church means that you are interfacing and you have relationships in amongst the body of Christ, which means if you're let go and you're angry, the ripples and the effects and the earthquakes and the tremors that can happen are usually far longer and more impactful, because each person represents an individual in the church who touches another person in the church, that touches another person in the church, and so on and so on. Now, how does that work in the business world? When you got to look under the sheets, you see something that doesn't fit, and what do you do with them? Does it affect your entire organization by ripple effect? Or is it that you just let that person go and you fill their zone? What's that?
There's definitely impact.
There's definitely impact.
Mhm.
What area of impact do you find is the most negative when it comes to the corporate world?
Usually when someone's leaving, they have a lot of choice words to say. So that could start the rumor mill.
Okay.
So that's part of it. You have a morale issue. If someone really liked them, they don't understand why they're leaving. You have morale issues. So from a human resources perspective, those are the things that I've dealt with.
So really, it's not that much different from the church world. That's not encouraging at all. Yes.
So, if you had to let go of somebody on your team that was there for like 30 years, what could they have possibly done that was so bad?
It's not even bad. It's seeing that they cannot accomplish the next level.
Right.
See, the issue isn't that somebody is bad. When you let people go or move people within an organization, within a team, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that they are unable or unwilling, because most people are able, but most are not willing if that's the position that they're in. Because everyone can be educated and grow and mature, but not everybody wants to extend themselves. Not everybody wants to increase themselves. So therefore, when you find a team member that's in that position, it's not that they're not a nice person. Now, I'll give you an example. I had a team member at one point in time on staff, and I looked at them and I said, I need this from you. And they simply looked at me and said, well, I'm not going to do it. And I says, no, you don't understand. I want that. And they said, well, I'm just telling you, Pastor, the fact is that I don't have that capability and I'm not doing it. And I said, well, I can send you to somebody that will help give you that capability. He goes, no, then you're not getting this. I'm not doing that. And I said, great, no problem. From that moment on, he was already let go. I didn't let him go right that moment, but I already let him go. At that moment, I was now planning his successor. I was already planning and moving ahead to release him from the church. Now, when he left, he affected, I think, about 30, 35 people. Went on the road with them, just moved out with that when they shared their stuff and what they didn't like and so on and so forth. But ultimately, what many people don't like to do, and this is a team reality, is that you've got to look under the sheets. You've got to actually see, is a team working as a team, or are they actually just saying they're a team? It looks good on the upside of the sheet. The pillows are put right on the bed and everything like that. But when you pull the sheets up, we still have individual people doing their individual thing. This has to be confronted, because to truly excel, can you imagine if Edison, in the creation of the incandescent light bulb, he came upon a guy who was working, which ones were they? The people, Lawson, Force, and Joule, who were doing the testing, and all of a sudden he came in and Lawson and Force are testing another idea. They're not even paying attention to what he's doing. Well, we automatically know that there's going to be a problem and there's going to be a delinquent timetable, because this is where his plans were. And he was the visionary. So we have to be able to look under sheets and say, and be honest. And I think that's one of the challenging things. In fact, one of the things, and I'll ask the business world this question too. But in the church world, what many times churches are doing, and the larger churches are doing, they're actually hiring a team to come in, and they individually evaluate every single team member that's there, and then they do the firing.
See, I was thinking about what you said there about the ripple effect and that person taking 10 or 20 people with them. I was really trying to weigh out a couple. I mean, very rarely we had to let someone go. And we try to be super concise with their goals, what we expect out of them. And there's been a review process like, hey, you're just not doing this. You got to get this up. I mean, they know it's coming. And I believe if you really have a maybe not a super strong team, but at least a decent team, one weak member is killing the whole team. Like,
yes.
So when we have had to actually let that go, and I can probably count on one hand how many times it's really come to that point, the rest of the team is like excited, like, whoa, it's a relief, because they weren't really pulling their weight. They weren't a member of the team anyways, so they were almost excited and happy to see him go, as long as you don't do the surprise attack, like, oh, you're not working, time to go. We've never done that. I mean, everyone pretty much knows who's not pulling their weight and what's going on, and our goals and everything is crystal clear, so they know. And the rest of the team's almost excited to, or the rest of the team has almost shoved them out to the point where they've, all right, started looking for other work or started opening up other opportunities because they know they're not.
And I will say that when that team member did leave, the team was happy.
Right.
Which was, we talk about white elephants in the room. I mean, we all know them. So this is an uncomfortable but yet stimulating book, because it demands that you have to look under the sheets. And one of the things in this book that I really, the reason that we're going to work through it is simply because what they want to establish and what they have established by writing this book is statistically proven over what has produced the greatest teams. So it's not like they just, here's our thoughts. They've actually studied the greatest teams, the greatest companies, and again, we're not talking Christian. They've studied the greatest teams, and these principles that they're going to establish through this book are the ones that they've seen that are always consistent statistically within each team that they have studied. So I want to talk about it. It's called Patterns, Rules, and Qualities. Now, how many of you ever watched The Prophet on TV? What are the three things that he always looks at? People, process, and product. Those are the three things. Whenever he goes into a company that's failing, and it's always a company that's failing, he goes in, and ultimately what he's doing is he's looking at those three things. They are people, process, and product. Now watch, the very first thing he always looks at is the people. I remember he went into one situation, and when he went into this situation, it was in California. I want to say it was like a taco thing or whatever. It was cheese. I think it was cheese or something like that. But anyways, he went in, and everywhere he went, he would ask the people. He wouldn't ask the owners. He would say, so who's in charge here? And they would say a woman's name. And he would ask the owner, who's this woman that everybody mentions? They're all afraid. They said they're afraid when she walks into the room. And he goes, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. The very first thing he always confronts is the people. Well, why? Because the people make the organization. If it was just a one-man show, then it's no big deal. You just go talk to the owner. But it's not the owner. You know, what he has found when he's done a lot of the research is either infighting with the family, who are supposed to be the team, or infighting within the organization, which are the team. Which if the people are out of order, it doesn't matter how good a product it is going to submarine itself. So here he's really focusing on patterns. And the patterns that he's going to pull out of this book are the patterns that are recognized from the greatest teams. And there are rules. There are certain rules that are mandatory within every single team. And if those rules are not implemented and followed through, then you'll always find great amount of stress within the team members. And then the qualities. Each team member has to have specific qualities that are going to work together in cohesiveness so that there's a flow as one. I love this because he gets into right off the bat. What are the first sparks that ignite a true team? Number one, each team member believes without a shadow of a doubt they have the ability to write the future. So what that means is this. Pastor Dan is over our assimilation. He believes without any question that he has the capability, the anointing, the call of God in his life to be able to sit down and write the future of assimilation for his Tabernacle Family Church to house the thousands and thousands of people that are going to be coming through the doors. He absolutely believes that. Pastor Cody believes that he has the capability of doing that with the youth. Pastor Chad with the young adults. Pastor Obi with the Bible College, and so on and so forth. If you don't believe that, they found that this is a key to every single team member. Pastor Johnson, he has been such a blessing to us. You know, and honestly, I've so enjoyed Pastor Johnson. And you know, we're praying for longevity. You know, we were already in extension, but we're always praying for longevity. But you've got to believe that you have the capability of rewriting and writing the future of the company with the responsibilities that you have been given. If you don't believe that, if you don't believe in yourself, then dear Lord, why would anybody else? If you don't believe you have the capabilities, then why in the world are you in that position? Because you're going to flounder. You're going to deal with low self-esteem. You're going to deal with, again, protectiveness, because you don't want anybody to or do more than you. You don't want to look bad. We've got to get down to the reality of saying, these are my capabilities. I've got to hone my skill. I ask this question so often. For the last almost 4 years, we've been doing these kind of meetings. And I ask this question so many times. What leadership book are you reading right now? I'll wait for answers.
John
We'll start with Pastor Cody. Go right across. Go.
Let's just finish the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
5 dysfunctions of a team. You don't even know that. We'll get you.
John Maxwell's.
John Maxwell's book, which one?
The three top things that leaders need to do.
3 top things that leaders need to do. None? Brenda? A leadership book on kids ministry. Pastor Johnson?
I don't know what's others. I just got a bunch of
You got a bunch of books.
5 levels of leadership.
5 levels of leadership. Bible schools, yes.
Outliers.
Outliers. Outliers? L-I-A-R-S?
IERS.
Oh, wow.
Outliers.
That's interesting. Is it good?
It's a different take on things. It's a children's picture book, but
A
it's
children's picture book. So bad. Mindy? None. Chad?
5 levels of leadership.
5 levels of leadership. Leadership Bible. That's, you need a leadership book besides the Bible. Here we go.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Every young man's battle. Young lady. Triggers. Woof.
Good.
How to
She's making up a
lead.
book right now.
She's making up a title. She's even making up a title. What are we gonna do? Come on, right online. Now I need all the viewers write down. Get right on the chat right now and write the leadership book that you're reading. Yes. Yes. Worship leading. Very good. None.
Millionaire Next Door.
Millionaire Next Door is very good.
Today Matters by John Maxwell.
Today Matters by John Maxwell. Every one of you should be reading a leadership book. And if you're not, then you know that you're not excelling. You cannot excel unless you're investing in yourself. So here we are. This is the very first key to finding somebody on a team or a team member of the successful matter that knows that they can change and write the future. It is important in the trenches who are behind, it is the people in the trenches who are the force behind any sustained change or movement within a church or company. Each team member has come to the conclusion that the one-man show or the charismatic CEO are not the game changers. It's each team member that's a game changer. Now, what that means is this. If there's a level of insignificance in their own mindset, in their own heart, then ultimately the sheets are going to get kind of full. And that is because you're not going to excel. So you're always going to be hiding under the sheets. When people are excelling, you're going to tear them down. When people are excelling, you're going to be hiding in the shadows. There's a necessity to make sure that you yourself believe that you have the capabilities of changing and writing the future of the company. They believe in themselves, the gifts that God has given them. People in breakthrough teams report their highest loyalty is their relationship with one another, the other team members. We've had a lot of people come to the church that have been part of the armed forces. And we've had a lot of young men and young ladies as well who have actually been overseas and been at war. Sergeant Gonzalez is a personal friend of mine. He's not just Sergeant Gonzalez, not just they come to the church. He's a personal friend of the family and really got saved here and got filled with the Holy Ghost here. And he's, I believe, on his 3rd tour, maybe his 4th tour. And one thing that he has found is that he just sent, I just talked with him, and he's in the Middle East right now. And he just said to me, he says, I feel guilty. And I said, why do you feel guilty? He said, because they just sent, because he's leaving in November. He's coming home here just in a few days. He said, they just sent my team to Iraq. Now, many people don't know, but they're now using chemical warfare on American soldiers in Iraq. And he said, I sent my team to Iraq, and I'm here. He says, I need to be with them. I said, well, you're coming home. He says, I love my family at home, but I need to be with my men. There is a loyalty to the team. A loyalty to the team. And that loyalty is they're not fighting, let's be honest. Many people don't even know what they're fighting for, but they're fighting for each other. this is a key, not only the capabilities of each team member knowing their skill, knowing their capabilities, and watch, each team member has to rely on the fact that you know what you're doing. The job of the team of Sergeant Gonzalez is disengaging bombs. That's his job. He was sent to Afghanistan the time before, and the reason being sent there was because the last guy got blown up. So he was sent because the last guy died. So here he is, he's over there. He has to rely on his team. He has to rely on the ones who know what to wear, who know how close to get, who know which wire to cut. Because if you don't know that, then you're going to kill the rest of your team. And this is where we find that people who are team members need to learn how to rely on each other. This is not just, it's not the CEO. People come to me all the time and ask, Pastor, what's happening? I don't know. Pastor, when's this happening? I don't know. I don't know. Do you know everything going on in your company? Not a clue. Not a clue. Did you know everything that was going on when you were in HR?
No, I wish I did.
No, we all wish we did. Actually, TV Jake says this, a pastor or leader who knows everything that's going on in their organization is not part of a growing organization. So you have to trust that each team member knows which wires to cut, which means they've gone to school, which means they've studied. Because what would happen if the Taliban decides to change some of the wires up, changes the colors? They've got to be educated enough. They've got to self-educate. They've got to go to classes to make sure that they're not going to destroy the rest of the team. It is that imperative to recognize that each person on the team plays an enormous role of success and or failure. And the loyalty has to be within the team. They've done the studies. This is the study. They've done the studies and they found that the loyalty is not usually to the CEO or the senior pastor. Isn't that horrible? The loyalty is usually amongst the comrades. In fact, they made a very interesting statement. They said this. They said that 63% of workers said that the productivity of the team was higher when workers were friends outside the workplace. They actually used, in this book, they actually used the word love. Love and camaraderie are what drives a team to the highest level of success. They actually said that the successful teams are the ones who have at least one close friend within the organization. And why is that? Because when it comes time to succeed, when it comes time for a project, when it comes time for a vision, they're going to be faithful to each other, loyal to each other, because they want each other to succeed. This is why the Adam and Eve syndrome works so amazing with companies, with churches, with Adam and Eve, which is divide. Get people to be the separatists. Look under the sheets and see that there really isn't a team, but everybody's doing their own thing. Because no matter how it looks with the pillows, now no matter how pretty the what do they call that thing that's over the bed? The comforter, the blanket, whatever you want to call the thing. My wife spends a lot of money on them. That's all I know. It's got to match the, it's got to match the curtains, and the pillows have to match the bedspread or whatever you call it. They're very important, right?
Absolutely.
If it doesn't, it can look as good as you want on the outside, but if you look underneath and you have all these folks that are just doing their own thing, then ultimately you're not going to be successful. Intention never makes you successful. Intention is nice, but good intentioned people don't go to heaven. Nice people don't go to heaven. Really, yeah, good.
Yeah, no, so I'll give you kind of a thing. Up until about, let's say 10, 12 years ago, when I first got out of college up till then, I would go around to all the shops, just basically pick off their best mechanic, their highest paid mechanic, their most knowledgeable mechanic. Those guys can, that's literally what, yeah, no, the dealership's train them better than anywhere else can, so we grab them from there. But those guys inevitably don't get along with anyone, they're arrogant, they're a little more conceited, and we had more comebacks. I had the strongest crew we've ever had. And I can honestly say, like right now, for the last 5 years, we probably had the least technologically savvy crew I've ever had. But they all play nice in the sandbox together. They all hang out after work. They help each other out. And our production is way over where it ever was.
Yes.
Our comebacks are way down. They'll be the first ones to jump in. Hey, what are you doing over there? Like, more because they want to just kind of talk and BS, but they work through problems. We don't outsource anything. We used to always have to send something. About once a month, we couldn't figure something out, so we'd have to send it to a different shop. We never do that anymore. And we literally have the youngest, most inexperienced. They're experienced, but
right.
the least experienced we've had. But they all play nice together. They're not above one another. They're not.
Friends help friends and comrades.
And that's the first thing. I spend more time trying to keep that team tight, because you will have uprisings. You'll have a little bit of a spat, and the littlest thing turns so quick into something out of control, and then you get two of them battle, and then the whole team's falling apart.
Oh yeah.
So if you don't nip,
You got to nip it quick too.
real quick,
Yep.
it's gonna take a couple days, and it's.
This was something I used to do badly. What I would find was when there were problems, I would say, well, just let it lie and we'll see it work its way out. No, it never works its way out. It usually inflames.
Yeah.
You leave an open wound long enough and you're going to get gangrene. There's a necessity to make sure no infection gets in, which means you usually got to deal with it quickly. Exactly. And I love the fact that this book is so practical. But it comes to this, because every one of you who are the main team members here at the church, and you yourself have teams. So this goes deeper. It's not just one layer. It's all layers. The necessity to make sure that you look under your own sheets as we look under our sheets. This is the part of growing an organization that is a challenge. And again, I'll say it one more time. Just like in the Army, just like Sergeant Gonzalez, he feels guilty coming home to his blood family in America because his brothers are still over there fighting. Dear God, if we ever get that in the kingdom, what can be accomplished? At odds. The first thing that comes to mind is that people working together would be at odds with each other. And at times, this is true without question. But research concluded the most teams are at odds with their senior leaders. They're not striving to be difficult, just the best, and at times the senior leaders do not see the nitty-gritty that the in-the-dirt teams are experiencing. So the actual studies show that with the highest level teams, they're usually not happy with their senior leaders. Now, I'll be honest, as a senior leader, I find that you're not always going to be the most loved. You're definitely not always the most understood. I've had accusations that I'm mean. I've had accusations that I'm hurtful. I've had accusations that I was a liar. I've had accusations that, let me see. I have pretty much them all. I mean, what else can you say? I've had them all, honestly. I've been accused of a lot of things from team members. They never say it to your face. They always say it behind your back. Always remember, though, with your team member, as a team member, whatever you say in private, it's always going to be shouted from the rooftop. Yeah. Because always remember this, is that if that person that you've shared that with gets mad, you know they're going to try to hurt you. And how are they going to try to hurt you? They're going to divulge what you've divulged. There's a need to recognize that you don't go and interface your anger with each other. You've got to be willing to go to the person who's in charge. Listen, we're talking church, right? That's right. God's kingdom stuff. With God's kingdom stuff, you've got to be willing to go and you've got to be willing to share. I don't agree with this. And if you got a good leader, it's not that they're going to be excited that you're saying you don't agree with them. But I'll tell you, if they're a good leader, then they're going to listen to you and they're going to at least go to prayer with it. I've had people come up to me and say, Pastor, I think what you're doing is wrong. Well, the first thing is you take a breath. But then I always take it to prayer. And I used to always tell the staff this when I used to run the staff meetings. Well, I'm not ignoring you, but it usually takes me about a week to process something. I'm not going to just sit there and you're going to make a statement, I'm going to make a quick decision. I'm going to process that. I'm going to break it down, not according to your understanding, but according to how I see the vision going. And maybe this is what you're saying will work in the long term of the vision, or maybe it won't. But I've got to process these things. But the team members have to be willing to come to each other and or the senior leader and make sure that you work these things through. There's got to be loyalty within the team. And listen, if you can't be loyal enough to make mistakes, then you can't be loyal. Each team member, let me see. Ingredients to building a successful team. Number one, a key to breakthrough teams is that they're focused on conquering barriers, expectations, and they hate stagnancy. They also recognize that the work relationship requires effort. Now, I used to make this statement, and I'm going to reestablish it. And I know those who've been here long periods of time, you've heard it before. And that is, as a pastor or a leader, you shouldn't be making friends with people that aren't on the leadership team. You shouldn't be friends with them. You can be an acquaintance. Jesus was a friend of sinners, more acquaintance with sinners. But his closest friends were the 12. And then he had within that even closer. What you'll learn is that when you make friends outside of the leadership team, that many people cannot separate your spiritual authority or your authority in their life with being a friend. The only people I've ever really found that are able to actually do that are business people. And usually higher end, what I mean by that, more successful business people, because they have to do it on a constant basis. But normal people can't do that. And I remember making this mistake. I know I've told you this example before, but Pastor Edlin told me they should only know you in the spirit and not in the flesh. And I said, but they're my friends. They need to know that I'm touchable, reachable. And when push came to shove, watch. When my leadership team at Newfield, when it came time for, I needed to override a decision they were making because they were making a terminal mistake. They looked at me and said, we no longer see you as our apostle. We no longer recognize you in our lives. Well, that was my fault. It wasn't their fault. That was my fault because I used to buddy with them all the time. I created that problem. And you can't fix that breach once it's made. You can't go back and fix that bridge. That bridge burned now. So there's a need to recognize that, listen, it takes effort to build relationships, and your relationships should be within the leadership team. You should be building them with each other. As I said last week, many times the bar leagues are far closer than the church staff. I had a pastor friend of mine who had to write up a bunch of rules. And on the last rule was, you are not allowed to stab another staff member.
Wow.
And I had to ask him because, that's just, it stirs curiosity. What do you mean you're not allowed to stab? He said, well, I had 2 staff members that I sent on a trip to go. They went to a conference, and I had them staying in the same room, and one got mad at the other and stabbed him.
Wow.
He said, so he actually had to write in the rules, no stabbing other team members. And so, listen, it takes effort. You got to put in effort to spend time. Last week we did something, Minister Redder and I did something with our own team, and that is, we told you to go to breakfast. In fact, we didn't make it a choice. We told you cancel everything and go to breakfast. And why did we do that? Well, because I'm just going to say it. I really believe that at times we stop seeing each other as people and we start seeing each other only as production. We're not machines. We're people. And we've got to build relationships. And the relationships have to be strong. because your loyalty will be to the person that you're next door to in the office. And if they need help and they can't rely that you're going to be able to bring help, I can't remember how many times I've said, even with Brenda, if you're not doing anything and Brenda has some teachers that canceled last second and she doesn't have enough teachers, then every one of us should be willing to step up to the plate and walk into one of the rooms and be a kids minister that week. Well, that's not my ministry. Everything's your ministry. I love Jake's. Don't tell me what you're willing to do. Tell me what you will do. He said, because I don't have the money to hire 20 different people to do 20 different things. I can only hire 10 people to do the 20 things. When the church at large went through that massive financial problem, when the economy bottomed out, churches lost enormous amounts of money. Some of them lost a quarter to a third of the income that was coming into the church. Especially if you were up near Detroit and so on and so on. But I know 4 major ministries that laid off over 100 apiece. Over 100 ministers, over 100 people on their team were laid off. 4 different ones. That's massive. We've got to know that team is everything, and honestly, we've got to hang on to each other. And if we're not going to do that, then you're going to recognize that if you're not willing to put the effort, then you are going to be a seclusionist. You are going to be a separatist. And the sheets will be lifted one day, and you're going to find that you held the team back. Each team member must agree to certain principles. They must be willing to demonstrate competency. Think of teams where some members withhold their full ability. An implied contract is broken. I love that. Have you ever worked with somebody that didn't hold their end up? And you now got to do their job too? I used to manage it when I left Newfield. Let me see, where was I? Before I came to Newfield, I was promised a church in Massachusetts. So I went to, Miranda and I were just married, like literally months. We moved to Massachusetts, moved into my dad's house, into my sister's old bedroom. And yeah, amen, wow. And and I had to get 2 40-hour-a-week jobs. So I worked 40 hours a week at Subway, and I worked 40 hours a week at Tom McCann. And I sold $8,400 worth of shoes a week at Tom McCann. When I was going to move up here, when I was moving to Newfield, I actually called because they had a Tom McCann in Ithaca, and I said, I would like to transfer. And they said, that would be great. And I said, well, my sales are $8,400 a week. And they said, well, that's our sales for the entire team a week. And I said, no, I don't want a job. I had lost my shirt. But I remember being at this job, and I had 2 other people that I worked with on a shift. Now, what was amazing about this shift was is that they were starting a new system, and it was a conveyor belt system. So what they would do is you would go, you would have the client take their shoe off, and you would measure their feet. They would pick the shoe you wanted. You'd walk over to this little machine, punch a few buttons. A code would go out back they had a guy simply out back, and that guy would find the shoe, put it in a bag, and it would come across the conveyor belt. As you wouldn't have to run back and forth, it would come across the conveyor belt. It was awesome. It was awesome if the guy did his job. I remember running back, because I'm selling a lot of shoes, man. I'm running back, getting 3 or 4 sets of shoes at a time. Running back and forth, because the guy just didn't do his job. How much could I have made Tom McCann? How much could I have made for my own family? How much could I have accomplished if the man filling the bag, instead of walking out back and having multiple smoke breaks during the day, would have filled his bag? One of the, I'm not even going to use the word key. It is of utmost expectancy. You must be competent. What does it mean to be competent? What does it mean to be competent? Somebody online. What does it mean to be competent? Able to do your job. You must be competent. If you're not competent, you're immediately breaching the number one rule of a team. Your lack of competency will hold the team back. Your lack of competency will stop forward motion. Your lack of competency could actually hurt somebody. If it was in Sergeant Gonzalez's world, it would kill somebody. Competency is the number one rule to creating a team. And every teammate must come in, number one, knowing that they can write the rules for the future. Staying competent. You see, we've talked about lethargy so many times. We've talked about sliding into, what do we call it? Inertia. So many times. But how easy is it to fall into inertia? I'll prove it to you. How easy it is. When was the last time you filled out and did a 10 things of your day? Sunday night. Last night. Pareto. Yesterday. How easy it is to slide back and never do what works. Listen, we broke Pareto down. We did a whole study on Pareto. How if you take your day, break it into 10 functions. You take your top 2 functions and you only do those top 2 functions before you do anything else. Then you'll get more done, more production done in a day than at any other time. And then we studied the book called The One Thing. So you take the Pareto and now you've got 2 top things. And now you take the one thing out of the 2 top and you do that one thing. And when that one thing is done, then you move to number 2. But you don't touch number 2 until number 1 is done. And they found productivity in every team skyrocketed. We studied it. We had you do it for weeks. But if you're not still doing it, then you've slid into inertia. Which means you're back in the same old habits, which means you lose a level of competency. Because if you're not focused, there's no way for you to be accomplishing tasks. You cannot be truly successful without focus. In all the pastors I've worked with, in all the training I went through, it's simple. It does. It all comes down to focus. It comes down to clarity of vision. And when the clarity of vision and expectations are not spelled out, and if they are spelled out and yet the team isn't clear on how they will accomplish parts of that every single week, then ultimately it becomes just I was telling you about our house the other day. And we just moved into a new home. And we found last Friday when we flushed the toilet, things were just not moving. In fact, just to be a little gross, we flushed the toilet and up came corn and peas. Which means that when you ran the sink in the kitchen, it was coming up in the toilet. That's what it means. And that, by the way, is a bad thing. And so we snaked it and nothing seemed to work. And we did this and nothing seemed to work. And ultimately, my brother-in-law had to go in there and he had to cut the pipe, put a extension. I don't know what he did down. I wasn't down there. But then I had to go buy a 50-foot snake and he's running this snake and out comes this piece. It's about this blockage is about this long and it looks just like chicken breasts.
Oh, no.
Looks just like chicken.
Good.
But it's not.
But it's not. I don't know what it was. It was really gross. Nothing starts usually in big globs. It usually starts one little piece at a time. And all of a sudden, you see, because that couldn't have happened since we moved into the house. That was there before we moved into the house. And it just took a few extra times when we flushed that it all came and got blocked. Watch. Are you blocking the team? You got to ask yourself these questions, and you got to be honest. Are you blocking the team? Are you competent? Here we go. An implied contract is broken when you're not competent and running in your full ability and capabilities. Conflict typically ensues, and sometimes it's quite dramatic. I'm going to end with that today. I want to ask you a question, and this is what I want you to do for your homework. I want you to write down your job and your job description. Now, I know everybody on my staff has a job description. So what I want you to do is I want you to look through your job description and ask yourself a simple question. Am I competent for this job description? And or am I working at my full capability? And I want you to be honest. I don't want it. I just want a yes or no. Text, email. Yes or no. Am I competent to do what's in front of me? And number two, if I am competent, then am I working at my highest capability for that job? And if the answer is no, and I want you to be honest with yourself, if your answer is no, you need to ask yourself why. And you need to look at yourself and be honest with yourself and say, if I'm not, and I'm not willing to change, then why? Now, this is a hard one because this means all of us have to be honest. It's not just you. I have to be honest too. I have to sit down with myself, sit down at the table. And I went to my team this morning and I apologized for not, I'm learning stepping back. I've been learning that for a few years. And that's a challenge because sometimes you step too far back. At the same time, the last few months, my wife dealing with that bad diagnosis that God healed her of, God healed her of cancer. Number two, we dealt with that for over a month. Number two, dealing with moving into a new house, which is horrible. Just what a horrible experience. Moving is horrible. Been in the same house 17 years. It's horrible. And number three, I love my father, but my father is in town for 2 months, which means it takes a lot of time. And I don't mind spending time with my dad. It's a challenge at times because I need to be here. So I actually went into my team this morning, the pastoral ministerial team of his tabernacle, and I apologize for being less than I should be. But I've got to go back and I've got to look through the same, I'm going to ask myself the same questions you do. If I can't do it, then what am I doing? And if you can do it and you're not doing it, what are you doing? Because you're not stopping you. Look under the sheets. You're stopping a whole team. And this is a challenge that if we don't constantly keep in front of us, inertia just gets invoked. I challenge all of us to demonstrate personal competency. Expand yourself with leadership traits by goal setting, communicating, trusting, accountability, and recognition. Now I'm going to say this with my own team. It's just for my own team. I expect at least once a week you're going to go out with somebody different for breakfast on the team. So that you don't lose humanity, personality. It's very easy. And I want to challenge you to do that. I'm not going to challenge you. I'm asking you, and I'm not even asking you. I'm telling you. Once a week, I'd like you to go to breakfast with a different team member just to get and hear their voice outside of the workstation. Build relationships. Philip, behave yourself. Anybody have any questions? This is going to be a great book, man. I'm really excited about getting into it, breaking it down. We're just really doing an overview. But does anybody have any questions concerning the book? It's called The Orange Revolution. I'd encourage you to get it by Gostick, Adrian Elton Chester.
Why is it orange? Have you read that far yet?
I have read that far. I just haven't chose to divulge that yet.
Oh, all right.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you all for watching online. I know this will bless you. Please bring this to your team. Don't just keep it to yourself, your team, so that they can grow with.
in New Conquers this week.
Find out about